This story is about John, whose wife was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of her boss. John believes that his wife did not kill anyone, and he is determined to break her out of prison at any cost, with only 3 days to do so. At the beginning of the story, we are introduced to John, his wife Lara, and their son, who live in Pennsylvania. Lara has diabetes, so like every morning, she takes her insulin. That day, her eyes fall on her overcoat, which has blood stains on it. Lara is confused, wondering how the blood ended up on her coat. The previous night, she had worn that same coat. Soon after, the police arrive at their home and arrest Lara for the murder of her boss. Lara screams that she did not commit the murder, but all the evidence is against her, and she is sentenced to life imprisonment. 3 years pass. Lara misses her son a lot, although John often takes their son to visit Lara in jail. However, their son remains angry with Lara because he wants her to be with him. John brings their son back home and once again looks through Lara's case file. The story then shifts back 3 years to the night when Lara's boss was murdered. That night, Lara and her boss argued, and as Lara was walking toward the parking lot, she bumped into a girl wearing an overcoat. During their collision, the button on the girl's overcoat broke. Lara saw the girl's face. After this, Lara went to the parking lot, where she found a fire extinguisher near her car. She moved it to the side, got into her car, and drove away. But Lara had no idea about it. A man sees Lara leaving the scene, and soon after, the police arrest her. The fire extinguisher that Lara had moved earlier had her fingerprints on it. Although Lara kept insisting that the girl with the overcoat had attacked her and that the button from the overcoat had fallen there, no one believed her. Now, after 3 years in jail, Lara has been in prison for that long. John believes that his wife, Lara, did not commit the murder, and he is determined to get her out of prison at any cost. He meets with a lawyer, who tells him that no one has ever gotten out of prison after serving a sentence of 3 years. The lawyer advises him to forget about the case because all the evidence is against Lara. John replies that he might need to find another lawyer and angrily walks away. That night, John receives a call saying Lara is in the hospital. When he goes to visit her, he finds that she is chained to the bed with handcuffs. She had attempted to cut her veins. Seeing Lara in such a condition, John makes a vow to himself that he will do whatever it takes to break her out of prison. He meets a man named Damon, who has escaped from prison and even written a book about it. Damon tells John that the prison where Lara is held is right in the middle of the city, and as soon as she escapes, there will be a blockade across the entire city within 35 minutes, and she will be caught. Even if they manage to escape, they will need to think ahead about which country to go to and which fake IDs and passports will be necessary. John is determined to get fake IDs and passports for his entire family at any cost. He also needs to break his wife, Lara, out of jail. So, he keeps visiting the jail as a visitor to observe its weak points, while simultaneously working hard to arrange fake IDs. However, he has not yet found anyone who can make fake IDs and passports for him and his family. One night, a boy named David comes to his house and tells him that he can help with this. For this, David demands $1,000 as an advance. John agrees, gives him the money, and the next day, he meets David under a bridge, where David arrives on a bike and hands him the fake IDs and passports for John and his family. After receiving the documents, John returns home, determined to get Lara out of jail at any cost. To do this, he needs a duplicate key. He checks online and discovers that a special kind of bomb key can be used to open any lock. John then makes a bomb key and visits the jail again as a visitor. In the elevator, he attempts to use the key to open the lock, but accidentally breaks it inside. Panicked, John moves forward, but soon a female security officer arrives. She tries to use the key in the elevator but cannot get it to work. Upon inspection, she finds the broken key inside and sets off the alarm, causing all the doors to close. The CCTV footage is checked, and one by one, every visitor is called in for questioning. John notices a man standing behind him whose face is hidden. John says, "I'm right there," but when the footage is fast-forwarded, John is not in the frame. The officer places the broken key in front of John and says, "If this was you, your son would have to live in an orphanage because you would spend the rest of your life in prison." John is released because there is no solid evidence against him. As John walks out, he starts to feel nauseous and ends up vomiting in his panic. While this happens, the same detective who had handled his wife's case notices him. The detective becomes suspicious of John and starts keeping an eye on him. John, now determined, tries to find another way to break his wife Lara out of jail. He learns that twice a week, an ambulance for medical care visits the prison to check up on all the inmates. John knows that Lara must be getting her checkup regularly due to her diabetes. This means her medical file must be inside the ambulance. When the ambulance is empty, John sneaks in, steals Lara's file, and takes it home. Once there, he changes all the details in Lara's medical report. The next day, John visits Lara again and tells her, "I will get you out of here at any cost." Lara tells him that in 3 days, she will be transferred to another prison, which means John has only 3 days to act. John becomes extremely anxious because he has no money left. He calls a real estate agent and says, "I want to sell my house today." The agent tells him it will take 2 weeks to complete the paperwork for your house. You can't sell it before that. But John needs money immediately, so he takes his gun and drives to a bank, planning to rob it. However, he loses his courage and doesn't go through with the bank robbery. That night, John notices a very expensive car. He follows the car and sees a man get out and enter a house. This man is a drug dealer, and he's going to deliver something to his boss's house. When the drug dealer enters, John sneaks inside too, holding a gun. He demands money from the drug dealer. The drug dealer's boss goes upstairs, and a shootout begins between them, during which the drug dealer is wounded and his boss is killed. John grabs a large amount of money and puts it in a bag. As he is about to leave, the drug dealer asks to be taken to the hospital. John helps him into his car, but on the way, the drug dealer dies. John, realizing the situation, leaves the body by the roadside and drives away. The next day, the detective visits the drug dealer's boss's house, where they find the body. They also discover tire tracks and a piece of a car's taillight, which will eventually lead them to identify John's car. John is determined to break his wife Lara out of prison at any cost, because today is the 3rd day, and he has only one last chance. Once home, he gathers all the papers related to his plans into 3 separate bags. He throws one bag in a trash bin near his house and hides the other 2 bags in distant bins. Then, he drives to the medical ambulance, the same one he had used to steal Lara's medical report, with his son in tow. He secretly opens the door and places his wife's report inside. He changes everything in his wife's report, increasing her sugar levels so much that when the doctor reviews it, they will have no choice but to admit her to the hospital. This is his plan. Afterward, he drops his son off at a neighbor's house since there's a party at their place that he had been invited to. With that done, he heads to the hospital because he knows that Lara will soon be admitted. Meanwhile, when the doctor reviews Lara's report, he calls the jail and informs them that Lara's health is in critical condition and she must be transferred to the hospital immediately. On the other hand, the detective examines the taillight and figures out that it was John's car and that his wife is in jail. He realizes that John is up to something. The detective heads to John's house and finds that it is completely empty. Papers have been removed from the walls. The detective calls the jail and learns that Lara was transferred to the hospital due to her deteriorating condition. Now, the detective is certain that John's biggest plan is to break his wife out of jail, so he heads to the hospital as well. Meanwhile, John, dressed as a doctor, arrives at his wife's hospital room where there is a police presence. He takes the police officers at gunpoint and demands that they unlock Lara's handcuffs. As he is about to leave with his wife, the detective arrives at the scene and spots him in the elevator. John pulls out his gun and forces the detective to go down. He manages to get his wife out, and they both head toward a protest happening outside. John had planned this move, knowing about the protest in advance. He had jackets for the protest ready, which he gave to his wife, wearing one himself. They blend in with the protest crowd, slipping past the detective's watchful eyes. However, the detective continues to trail them, and John and his wife head to a train station, planning to escape via train. They go to the station where the train is about to leave. The detective arrives, but it's too late, and the train has already left. However, he continues to follow the train. On the way, John pulls the emergency brake and escapes. He had already parked his car along the route, so both of them quickly drove off. The detective reaches the train, but it's of no use because Lara and John have already escaped. John goes to the neighbor's house where he had left his son during the party, but when he arrives, he learns that the party is not at the house but at the zoo. Now, he needs to get to the airport as soon as possible because a citywide lockdown will soon be in place, and they will be arrested. He tells his wife that he has placed his father's number in their son's pocket, and the neighbor will take him home. They need to head to the airport now. However, Lara disagrees and says, "I will never leave this country without our son. I wanted to get out of jail for him." John has no choice but to agree. They both go to the zoo, where the party is happening. John takes their son from there. Now, the entire city is under lockdown, and every checkpoint has been alerted. An announcement is made at every checkpoint that any couple seen with a 6-year-old child should be arrested. John anticipates this and faces a checkpoint, but since he had intentionally given a ride to an elderly couple, who are now in his car, he is not suspected. He is allowed to pass through and drives away. Meanwhile, the detective finds the bag with the papers that John had discarded in the trash outside his house. He puts the papers back on the wall, but some of the documents are missing. The papers contained all of his planning. We then see John, his wife, and their son, who arrive at the airport. Their passports are checked, now under different names, and their photos are also cross-checked to see if any of them have a criminal record or have been restricted from leaving the country. However, the police department hasn't uploaded their photos to the internet yet, so they are allowed to proceed. At this point, the officer who had checked their passports goes for lunch, and a different officer takes over. Just as John and Sarah's photos are uploaded, the officer is unable to recognize them because he hadn't given John and Sarah permission to proceed earlier. John's luck is on his side, and they manage to get through. Meanwhile, the detective finds a photo of the White House in the papers at John's house, which makes him realize that John is heading to the US. He calls his fellow officers at the airport and orders that all passengers' boarding flights to America be checked. John, Sarah, and their son are expected to be on that flight. At the airport, all passengers traveling to America are checked, but John, Sarah, and their son are not on the list. The detective is informed about this and soon realizes that John has tricked him. He had deliberately left a bag outside his house in the trash, leading the detectives to believe he was headed to America when, in reality, he was going to another country. We then see John with his family, already seated on a flight, and they soon arrive in another country. That night, Lara and their son are shown sleeping. It is shown that Lara repeatedly had a dream in which she was sleeping with her son. She used to tell John about this dream, and today, John has made her dream come true. On the other side, we see the detective once again visiting the crime scene where Lara's boss was murdered. According to Lara, the girl she had bumped into, who had killed her boss, had dropped a button from her coat there, but it was never found. When they open the road drain cover, they still don't find the button. However, when they are closing the drain cover, they find the coat button there. This time, it evades the police's attention. If the detective had found that button, they might have been able to identify the real killer. But one thing becomes clear: Lara was innocent. She had never killed her boss. Now, she is far away from the police and their reach, living happily with her husband, John, and son in Venezuela. And with this, the film's story ends. We hope you enjoyed this story.